Let me wish you a happy Independence Day. For today's meditation, I have taken the gospel portion for today, St. John chapter 11, verse 16. St. John chapter 11, verse 16. Then Thomas, also known as Didymus, said to the rest of the disciples, "Let us also go that we may die with him." ദിദിമസ് എന്ന പേരുള്ള തോമസ് സഹശിഷ്യന്മാരോട് അവനോടുകൂടെ മരിക്കേണ്ടതിന് നാമും പോക എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞു. നമുക്ക് പ്രാർത്ഥിക്കാം. ദൈവമേ, സ്വർഗീയ പിതാവേ, വചനമാവുന്ന ദൈവമേ, നിന്റെ മുമ്പിൽ ഞങ്ങളായിരിക്കുന്നു. ഞങ്ങളുടെ ഹൃദയങ്ങളോട് ഇടപെടണമേ കർത്താവേ. നിന്റെ ശബ്ദം കേൾക്കുവാൻ ഞങ്ങളുടെ കാതുകളെ തുറക്കണമേ. നിന്നെ കാണുവാൻ ഞങ്ങളുടെ കണ്ണുകളെ തുറക്കണമേ കർത്താവേ. ഈ ആരാധന ഞങ്ങളെ ആത്മീയമായി വളർത്തുന്ന അനുഭവമാക്കി ഇരുവാൻ സഹായിക്കണമേ. ഞങ്ങളെല്ലാവരെയും അനുഗ്രഹിച്ച് ആസ്വദിക്കണം. ഞങ്ങൾക്ക് ആവശ്യമായ സൗഖ്യവും സന്തോഷവും സമാധാനവും നൽകണം. ബലഹീന അടിയനെ ക്രൂശന്മാർ മറിച്ചാട്ടെ. നിന്റെ നാമം മാത്രം ഇതിലൂടെ മഹത്വപ്പെടണം. യേശു നാമത്തിൽ പ്രാർത്ഥന കേൾക്കണമേ. Today we are celebrating St. Thomas Day. So let us meditate together on three aspects from the chosen portion. First is walking in the light. Lazarus, Martha and Mary were some of Jesus' best friends. In verse 6, we are told that Jesus loved Martha, her sister, and Lazarus. യേശു മാർത്തയെയും അവളുടെ സഹോദരിയെയും ലാസറിനെയും സ്നേഹിച്ചു എന്ന് വചനം പഠിപ്പിക്കുന്നു. But when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed where he was. It was only after 2 days Jesus finally got up and told his disciples, "Let us return to Judea again." And understandably, the disciples were astonished. They were afraid of going back to Judea. "But Rabbi," they said, "a short while ago, the Jews tried to stone you, yet you are going back there." Jesus answered the disciples' fear of going back to Judea with this: "Are in there 12 hours in the day? Are in there 12 hours in the day? Whoever walks in the day doesn't stumble, because they can see the light of the world. But whoever walks in the night does stumble, because the light is in them." The darkness separates or represents separation from God. Walking in the light represents walking in fellowship with God, walking in truth, and living within God's will for our lives. And since Jesus is the light of the world, for you to know where to go is to follow him. I'll repeat. Since Jesus is the light of the world, the only way to know where to go is to follow him. And if we try and steer our own course by our own understanding, we will definitely trip. And we will be lost because we will be in the dark. How many of us can relate to tripping up in life because we were in following Jesus? യേശുവിനെ അറിയാതെ ജീവിതം വഴി മാറിപ്പോയ എത്ര അനുഭവങ്ങൾ നമുക്കൊക്കെ പറയുവാനായിട്ട് സാധിക്കും. യേശുവിനെ അനുഗമിക്കുമ്പോൾ നമ്മുടെ യഥാർത്ഥ വഴി നമുക്ക് മനസ്സിലാകുവാൻ സാധിക്കും. യേശുവിൻ്റെ കൂടെ യാത്ര ചെയ്യുമ്പോൾ എത്തേണ്ടടുത്ത് എത്തുവാൻ അവൻ സഹായിക്കുകയാണ്. Secondly, he talks about death. Jesus knows that Lazarus is dead. Interestingly, he uses a phrase, fallen asleep. And of all that Jesus ever said about death, this is the most interesting or encouraging. See, sleep is a temporary thing. It is a temporary thing. മരണമെന്ന് പറയും, ഉറക്കം ടെമ്പററിയാണ് അല്ലേ? നമ്മൾ ഉറങ്ങുന്നു, കുറച്ച് സമയം കഴിയുമ്പോൾ, കുറേ അവേഴ്സ് കഴിയുമ്പോൾ, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ രാത്രി കഴിയുമ്പോൾ നമ്മൾ ഉണരും. സോ സ്ലീപ്പ് ഈസ് എ ടെമ്പററി തിങ്. സോ ബൈ സേയിങ് ദിസ്, ജീസസ് ഈസ് ഓൾസോ റിവീലിംഗ് ദാറ്റ് ഡെത്ത് ഈസ് നോട്ട് പെർമനന്റ്. വെൻ വി സ്ലീപ്പ്, we then awake. In John chapter 5:25, Jesus says, I tell you the truth. A time is coming, and has come now. The dead will hear the voice of the Son of God, and those who hear will live. ആമേൻ, ആമേൻ, ഞാൻ നിങ്ങളോട് പറയുന്നു, മരിച്ചവർ ദൈവത്തിൻ്റെ ശബ്ദം കേൾക്കുകയും കേൾക്കുന്നവർ ജീവിക്കുകയും ചെയ്യുന്ന നാഴിക വരുന്നു, ഇപ്പോൾ വന്നുമിരിക്കും. സോ സ്ലീപ്പ് ഈസ് എ ടൈം ഓഫ് റെസ്റ്റ്. Sleep is a time of rest. And the dead shall also rest from their labors. This says in Revelation chapter 14, verse 13. The dead will also rest from their labors. അവർ തങ്ങളുടെ പ്രയത്നങ്ങളിൽ നിന്ന് വിശ്രമിക്കേണ്ടതാകും. So Jesus says, Lazarus is dead, but let us go to him. Thirdly, the main theme, Thomas the Apostle. And after some more conversation, Thomas says to the other disciples, let us go to, that we may die with him. Thomas has always been the victim of bad publicity. He is known as Doubting Thomas for his skepticism before encountering the risen Christ. He was skeptical. He didn't believe what the others said. For that, they call him Doubting Thomas. But here, he is persevering Thomas. Not fully understanding what Jesus is doing, Thomas nevertheless sets his determination upon following him. Here, it is quite astounding that Thomas plays the role of the leader of the disciples in this passage. Here we see that Thomas is loyal after all. He may be a bit slow in understanding things, but he is determined to go on, putting one foot in front of the other and walking in accordance with the God's will. He says, let us go to, that we may die with him. Thomas sets his eyes on Christ and says, I don't know what will happen to me. In fact, it may be very bad. But come what may, I will follow him. In the face of confusion and perplexity, Thomas' example inspires us to persevere in faith and discipleship. Any of you know who are the blessed is? He is a guy who carried a large wooden cross to every continent in the world over a period of 40 years. He had heard God's call on his life to take that cross and living on a certain day and walking, witnessing to the gospel of Jesus wherever he went. But before he left, he suffered from an aneurysm. An aneurysm is a bulge in a blood vessel caused by a weakness in the blood vessel wall, usually where it branches. And he lay in the hospital bed, completely dismayed and stunned. Lord, he prayed, you instructed me to walk with that cross across the wall. I am supposed to leave within few days. The doctors had told Arthur he wouldn't leave if he didn't stay in the hospital. But he made a decision. He decided that he would rather die within the will of God than to live outside of it. He decided he would rather die within the will of God rather than to live outside of it. So he went out of the hospital. He got his cross and started walking, and didn't finish until 40 years later. I got a feeling that this is a thing Thomas and the other apostles had tried to do in our gospel portion. They were pretty convinced that going back with Jesus to the troublesome place of Judea is inviting trouble. Jesus would be killed, and definitely they would be killed along with him. So they decided it is better to die, or it is better to die within the will of God than to live outside of it. What about you? Would you die? Would you rather die within the will of God or than to live outside of it? We have to decide. May God bless you all. Let us pray.